Not for you.
I remember being excited when Universal Soldier first came out in 1992. Here were Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren as superhuman soldiers, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. But what followed over the next 20 years turned the series into a confusing mess. And in this video, I'll walk through the entire saga, from Emmerich's debut smash to the dead-end sequels, The Late Rescue by John Hyams, and the eerily creative flights of Day of Reckoning. So without further ado, let's jump in and untangle this mess, shall we? The original Universal Soldier from 1992 was a modest sci-fi action movie that clicked big with audiences. Roland Emmerich's very first film was made for about $23 million, but it took in over $120 million worldwide. Clearly, that's a huge amount of profit they made with this movie. It opened July 10th, 1992 at number 2 at the US box office. Only A League of Their Own beat it that weekend, and it exploded overseas. The film mixes genres in a distinctly early 90s way. Half sci-fi thriller, half buddy cop chase story, all wrapped in Vietnam War flashback trauma. Jean-Claude Van Damme's Luc Devereaux isn't just a punching bag here, as he usually is. He's surprisingly human and even funny in parts. Critics later noted Van Damme did a great deadpan job as a naive super soldier who rediscovers things like how pizza tastes good again, which is pretty fascinating if you think about it. I mean, turning simple things into grand events. Dolph Lundgren's Andrew Scott, by contrast, is a fully insane ex-soldier. So much so that he even wears his victims' ears on a necklace. Fans ate up the Van Damme-Lundgren dynamic, and the big stunts and pyrotechnics, and yes, a ridiculously over-the-top final duel, kept folks at the edge of their seats. It's worth noting, this movie wasn't universally praised by critics. Many reviewers pegged it as a knockoff of Terminator 2, or just mindless action, and it has only 34% on Rotten Tomatoes, though audiences gave it a decent B cinema score. Still, its box office vindicated the idea. Ironically, the original ending of the movie killed off Van Damme's character, but test audiences apparently hated that. The studio reshot it so Luke survives, leaving the door open for a sequel. Unfortunately, that plan ran aground when Coralco Pictures, the studio behind the movie, went bankrupt in 1995 after flops like Showgirls and Cutthroat Island. Any immediate sequel plans died in that collapse. By the mid-90s, the Universal Soldier property changed hands. Coralco's assets were sold off, and the TV rights specifically ended up with a Canadian company called Skyvision. In 1998 and 1999, we suddenly got not one, but 2 new Universal Soldier films, both made for television and shot cheaply. Universal Soldier 2, Brothers in Arms from 1998, and Universal Soldier 3, Unfinished Business, each starred a non-actor named Matt Battaglia as Luc Devereaux, with no Van Damme or Lundgren in sight. These films were essentially pilots for a TV series that never happened. They follow a new, unrelated plot. Battaglia's Luke learns he has a long-lost brother who's been turned into a Unisol by a crooked military contractor. Even the idea of having Gary Busey or Burt Reynolds show up couldn't save these. Fans and critics pretty much hated them as dull late-night filler. In all honesty, watching those 2 TV sequels is kind of like watching paint dry. In practical terms, these cheap knockoffs sullied the brand. They had no continuity with the 1992 story except the name, and they gave casual viewers the impression that Universal Soldier was now just bargain basement TV fodder. So yeah, the fact of the matter remains that the franchise was hurt by its association with 2 low-budget schlock sequels in 1998. Into this mess stumbled Jean-Claude Van Damme in 1999 for a comeback big-screen sequel, Universal Soldier: The Return. Sony Pictures picked up the rights while Van Damme was still under contract. Next thing we know, they set a $22 million budget and scheduled it for an August release. I don't know if you're aware, but August is Hollywood code for "we have no confidence in this film." So it's basically the dumping ground before Labor Day weekend. Van Damme himself was eager to revive his career after a string of flops. In fact, by 1998, his name wasn't opening doors like it used to. The team brought in stuntman turned director Mick Rogers to helm the project. They rewrote the story on the fly movie. Originally, a more horror-inflected script was passed to William Malone, but Van Damme wanted action comedy, so Malone left. The final product bears the scars of all that behind-the-scenes turmoil. Putting it mildly, The Return was a debacle. Sony didn't even allow a single advanced screening for critics. Audiences, upon finally seeing it, shrugged. It opened at just $4.6 million, which was the 7th place for that weekend, lagging well behind holdovers like The Sixth Sense. But yeah, The Sixth Sense is a hell of a movie though. Anyway, over its theatrical run, it earned only about $10.7 million domestically, less than half its cost. The audience grade was a pitiful C cinema score. In short, The Return died on arrival. Why did it flop so badly? For one thing, the tone was a mess. Instead of continuing the sci-fi thriller vibe of the original, The Return goes full goofball action. Yes, Luke Devereaux now has a blonde wife and a little kid, and he fights a skittering Michael Jai White as the body of an evil AI named Seth. The film pays no mind to either of the 1998 TV movies. It ignores their story entirely, as well as the gritty tone of the first film. Luke is suddenly a wisecracking superhero, grappling with artificial intelligence and one-liners, instead of a haunted soldier. Screenwriters William Malone and John Fasano lean hard into campy sci-fi cliché. Seth is basically Skynet from Terminator, and there are all sorts of glowing weapon gadgets. As a result, though, critics called it generic and second-rate. Its 5% Rotten Tomatoes score speaks volumes, and it's often listed among the worst sequels of the decade. Even Van Damme himself has said in interviews he wasn't proud of it. The theatrical sequel, Universal Soldier: The Return, was a major low point. Sony gave it a late August dump and didn't screen it for critics, a tacit admission of low expectations. Plot-wise, it makes little sense. Devereaux is inexplicably a normal husband and father, his warhorse persona forgotten, while he battles a rogue AI in human form, Michael Jai White's Seth. It opened weekly and closed at about $10.7 million in North America. Reviewers blasted it as gruelingly violent for violence's sake, or downright boring. In short, The Return did everything wrong. It contradicted earlier entries, ignored fan expectations, and used Van Damme's name in a cheesy action throwaway. Its failure sunk the franchise's hopes at the box office, and The Return became Van Damme's last studio vehicle. Afterward, there were no big-screen Universal Soldier sequels in the pipeline. The 2000s were pretty quiet for the franchise. Universal Soldier became exactly what you'd find in video rental bargain bins. Remember those? Or a dusty old title flickering on cable. Van Damme moved on, doing one direct-to-video film after another, and the general public forgot about Luke Devereaux entirely. The only life the title had was some licensing deals. For example, Turner paid about $2 million for TV rights to The Return, but that just meant TBS TNT could rerun the movie. No studio was willing to bankroll a new Unisol adventure after such a ruinous flop, and by 2005 or so, Universal Soldier was presumed dead. But then, surprisingly, the franchise was resurrected by a director few would have expected. In 2009, John Hyams, an action journeyman, convinced the rights holders to let him make another one on the cheap. The result was Universal Soldier: Regeneration. Hyams and producer Craig Baumgarten decided to wipe the slate clean. Regeneration treats the 1992 film as canon and ignores everything else. The TV films and The Return are simply never referenced. This gave Hyams a fresh start. He brought back Van Damme and Lundgren for one final face-off and added a new muscle-bound villain, UFC fighter Andrei Arlovsky, as an advanced Unisol. The setting was a war-ravaged former Soviet republic, Chernobyl's abandoned facilities, to be exact. The tone of Regeneration is very different from its predecessors. Gone are the cheesy jokes and cartoonish AI. Instead, Hyams goes gritty and intense. Luke Devereaux is now an older, haunted man, scarred, stoic, and clearly past his prime, who's been dragged back into action. He's called out of retirement to save the day one more time. The new enemy, Arlovsky's character, is a near-indestructible killing machine who laughs as bullets bounce off him. Hyams shoots the fights with hard focus. Lots of up-close hand-to-hand combat, gunplay in tight corridors, and brutal takedowns. The style is almost art house for an action film. Movie John called it a thrill ride, with tight, exciting combat sequences. Importantly, Hyams also layers in some existential ideas. He keeps Luke vulnerable. This soldier has endured way too much, and the movie even hints at themes of identity and war trauma lurking under the surface. Critically and commercially, Regeneration was a revelation, especially for a direct-to-video project. It was shot for only about $9 million, and it skipped theaters in North America, but it performed strongly in the home video market. Den of Geek notes that Regeneration did very well in the DTV market, even getting a theatrical release in a few territories. In other words, people still wanted to see Luke versus Andrew if it was done right. Reviews for Regeneration were much better than anyone expected. Fans praised Hyams' no-nonsense direction, saying he brought grit and realism back. The film's success proved there was still life in the franchise if handled creatively. As one critic put it, Regeneration essentially ignores the sequels that followed and works as a direct follow-up to the original, resetting the storyline as a lean action thriller. With this comeback, Hyams effectively erased the canon confusion. Now, Regeneration stands as the true second chapter. But Hyams didn't stop there, and in 2012, he released Universal Soldier: Day of Reckoning, a movie that turned out to be even weirder than the last. Day of Reckoning is part dark horror, part mind-bending action. It introduces a new lead character, John, played by action champ Scott Adkins. John is a soldier who is haunted by nightmares and false memories. In the film's opening, he comes home to find his family murdered, gruesomely, and by none other than Luke Devereaux himself, who appears in full berserker mode. John survives, but now he's on a mission to find out why this happened. The movie plays with your head. People may be clones, memories may be planted, and Luke Devereaux is now a mutated cult warrior arch-villain. Hyams leans into the philosophical and surreal. The story weaves in and out of bizarre sequences like flickering images, dream logic editing, and hallucinatory set pieces. One scene is shot entirely from John's point of view, terrifyingly disoriented. It asks big questions about identity. For example, John learns he might be one of many cloned Unisouls, and he keeps wondering if he's the original or just a copy. In a way, the film uses Universal Soldier's premise to do a Manchurian Candidate-style brainwashing thriller and an Apocalypse Now-style descent into madness story simultaneously. Hyams has mentioned influences like Chinatown and David Lynch to explain the film's dreamlike madness. Indeed, critics noted the Lynch references. In all, Day of Reckoning was less of an action film than a horror film, and it can be compared to Lynch and early Cronenberg because it is, after all, a strange, haunting, and sometimes even beautiful odyssey. Even though it's drenched in blood and violence, the movie has a hypnotic art house vibe that most people didn't see coming from a DTV action sequel. The response to Day of Reckoning was wildly mixed. A lot of mainstream critics recoiled at the extreme brutality, labeling it torture porn. Many reviewers warned audiences that the movie is so gruelingly violent, you half wonder if the director's goal is to make the audience get up and leave. It currently has 56% on Rotten Tomatoes. Not great, but higher than you might think. On the other hand, some critics absolutely loved what Hyams did and called the movie one of the best action films of the year. And Day of Reckoning also drew comparisons to mid-90s grindhouse horror classics. However, by 2012, the reputation of the franchise had done a U-turn entirely. The 1992 original, once dismissed as a cheesy action flick, began to be seen in a new light. Its themes of resurrected soldiers and lost humanity now look almost prophetic, and Hyams' sequels, made on shoestring budgets, earned genuine critical respect for their ambition. It's now often said that Universal Soldier is one of those series that got weirder and better instead of running out of steam. It's a rare series that takes more creative risks than it started with. And like the Phoenix USA military experiment in the story, the franchise itself rose from the ashes and turned into something of a cult treasure. After Day of Reckoning, the franchise went cold again. As the credits roll on that film, we see John Adkins presumably victorious, with Van Damme's Devereaux lying decapitated. Luke's head is in John's hands by the end. It's a dark, ambiguous cliffhanger that was never followed up. Indeed, since 2012, there have been no new Universal Soldier films. There was a bit of chatter. In October 2018, it was announced that a reboot was in development. Screenwriter Richard Wenk, who wrote The Equalizer, was attached to write a new script about a single resurrected soldier. But that project never materialized beyond the press release. No theatrical Universal Soldier 2 has ever been made. No comic books or TV series were launched, and Van Damme has gone on to other direct-to-video projects. The idea of a connected Van Damme universe, that is, crossovers with Time Cop or Kickboxer, never happened either. In 2025, the rights are scattered all over the place like confetti thrown from a hot air balloon. Saloon. The original distribution was Coralco TriStar. The TV rights went to foreign companies, and the Hyams films are controlled by smaller indie distributors. Even if someone wanted to make another movie now, they'd need to clear a lot of legal hurdles. So for all practical purposes, the Universal Soldier story ended with Day of Reckoning. John survives with the power to resurrect Devereaux's head again. Who knows where that would leave the world? And we're left to wonder if a new Dark Luke might emerge. But as of now, nothing's happening. In conclusion, the Universal Soldier franchise is one of Hollywood's strangest sagas. It launched with a bang in 1992. That is, a big idea action film with global appeal, only to spin off into schlocky TV sequels and a flop theatrical return. For 10 years, it lay dormant, nearly forgotten. Then John Hyams took the reins and turned it into an unexpected, artful thriller series. By the early 2010s, what was once just another 90s Van Damme vehicle had become a cult curiosity, praised for its boldness. Today, Universal Soldier lives on, mostly in fans' memories, as nothing but a reminder that even the goofiest action franchise can find new life, and that movies about resurrected super soldiers can sometimes come back from the dead in cinematic ways. Maybe one day someone will actually complete the circle and give us a proper grand finale. Until then, the story of Luke Devereaux remains an unfinished, intriguing one. Exactly the kind of story we'll always wonder, what if? Well, that was all in this one, folks. And if you liked the video, please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Those 2 small clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these marvelous videos. Stay safe and have a good one.